Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Liam's First Look. If you guys are new here, welcome back. My name is Liam, and I pick fights on the channel each and every week, except weeks like last week. There was no UFC action, so we took a week off. We had a nice little time to recover, get ourselves back into the game, but now we're very excited to look forward, to look ahead to what we have on the horizon. And that, of course, is UFC Denver. It's a patchwork card. It's a card that's been thrown together at the last minute. You know, a lot of moving pieces with a card like this. The main event had the old switcheroo. We were supposed to see Macy Barber get her chance to break into that top five in the women's flyweight division. Instead, we're now seeing Tracy Cortez get the same opportunity, and she's taking on Rose Namajunas, former champion, 115 pounds that was. Now she's up at 125 pounds, looking to get into title contention in her own right. Big fight, hometown main event for Rose Namajunas. So fascinating matchup here. And I think that we've got a lot of great fights to break down and get into. So like I said, if you're new here, welcome aboard. I appreciate you guys being here. Want to let you know, this is my first look at the card. Have I done some tape on this card? Yes, I have. We're late in the week getting to you with the first look, but there's a lot of switch ups, a lot of last minute stuff. So I'm not going to say I'm fully prepared for this at this point. I'm still doing a lot of tape, doing a lot of due diligence. We've got people that have never fought in the UFC before, like Fatima Klein. I want to do her the due diligence of watching all of her fights. I've only seen what's on Fight Pass so far. So those are the examples I want to give you guys off the top. We're going to give a first look. We're going to talk about every fight, but we're going to have more details for you. Maybe a special guest as well tomorrow for Bets and Banter. So stay tuned for more on that front. But without further ado, guys, let's get started like we always do on the first look, and that's with the main event of the evening. We're going to take a look at this main event, and like I mentioned, it's going down in the women's flyweight division. Thug Rose Namajunas 12-6 as a professional, taking on Tracy Cortez 11-1. So obviously you've got Rose Namajunas, more experience. We could start there, right? Higher level experience. She's been fighting in the UFC for a very long time. She's been a little bit more active than Tracy Cortez as well. Cortez only has 5 fights with the promotion. Meanwhile, Rose Namajunas has tripled her up in that regard at 32 years of age. It's not like she's ancient. It's not like she's an old woman. However, is she a young, hungry, scrappy contender in the same way? That's a lot harder to say, right? Obviously, changing weight classes, you know, that's something we see a lot of fighters do later on in their career. But I think one thing I've noted about Rose Namajunas is she does look to have the size to compete at 125. It doesn't look like she's totally outgunned in there physically. However, Manon Fiorot, who is one of the most physical flyweights in the division, was clearly much more physical than she was. And the other criticism, if I had any to levy towards Rose Namajunas in these recent flyweight fights, it does look like she's carrying a little thin layer of body fat. And I don't mean that to be disparaging or to judge anybody's appearance, but just talking about, you know, when you have a body composition for athletics, obviously making straw weight is a serious commitment for Rose Namajunas. She has to change her body composition in order to get down there. She has to shrink herself, right? And that gets harder to do as you get older. So I think that for Rose, it makes sense that we're seeing her at 125 pounds as she gets a little bit longer into her career. But does that, you know, necessarily serve her body's interest the best for fighting? I'm not sure that it does. The thing that's impressive to me is I went back through the stats to try and get a better feel for Rose Namajunas and how she's dealt with wrestling and grappling, because I do think that Tracy Cortez, despite her last fight, you know, showing out on the feet a little bit against Jasmine Jasudavicious, most of what she offers in her fights so far has been takedown, control-heavy approach. She tries to get on top of women. She tries to threaten with submissions. And when you're looking at Rose Namajunas, she's done a phenomenal job, especially recently in her career, of being the person that gets control. If anybody gets controlled in a Rose Namajunas fight, it tends to be her opponents. You know, you look back, I think Carla Esparza was able to get 4 or 5 minutes of control and submit her. That was a long time ago, right? And since then, you know, I'm going to pull it up because I sent these numbers in the chat over on Patreon earlier. But it did stand out to me as something that was really, you know, something impressive from Rose Namajunas, right? And I've come on here and criticized Rose in the past. I bet Carla Esparza in the rematch as well, hugely. And that was a nothing burger of a fight. Nothing happened there. I won't pretend that was some you know, marvelous read. It was just a fight where I thought the odds should have been closer. They obviously should have been closer. Nothing happened in 25 minutes. But in any case, right, let's go through Namajunas control time for and against, because I sent this earlier. Namajunas 7 minutes for and 2 minutes against Amanda Ribas. Now, Amanda Ribas is a 115-pound fighter. I think that's where she shines. I think that's her best work. But for her, it's a big imperative to cut down all that weight to 115. When Amanda cuts all that weight, her ability to take a punch is severely diminished. So her chin isn't that great altogether. And when you cut extra weight, when you bring Amanda down to 115, makes her very vulnerable to being clipped on the chin, to being knocked out. And so at 125, she was able to take the damage a little bit better. She was able to exchange better with Rose. She was able to land some shots on the feet. But I did think that we, also saw Amanda was just not physically able to dominate Rose. And she was able to get to a couple good positions. She was able to attempt some submissions even along the way. But what we didn't see from Amanda Ribas is a really committed, grappling heavy approach. She wanted to strike, and it was Rose Namajunas who ended up coming out with more control time there. 7 minutes 7 minutes of control time against Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili is known for being physical, for dominating these fights in the women's strawweight division. And it is hard to make it an apples to orange comparison because it was at strawweight. But Zhang Weili is known for being a control-heavy grappler, for getting on top of these women, for being too strong, too savvy. And Rose Namajunas was able to win those grappling exchanges, broadly speaking. She's able to get to the top position oftentimes. It's pretty impressive stuff. 4 minutes of control time, 1 minute against Waterson Gomez. I kind of throw that out of the sample. I think Waterson Gomez would get taken for her paper by Tracy Cortez at this stage of the game. And then 2 minutes 2 minutes against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So basically the last time that she went even with somebody on grappling metrics was Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And when you look at that fight, Karolina was able to get the win. It was a close decision. And I think that was kind of a turning point for Rose. She's had an ability to grapple from early on in her career. If you look back, Rose was able to get flying arm bars, rear naked chokes. She's gotten a few of these submissions on her resume, but she sort of turned away from that portion of her game and made it more focused on boxing and wrestling. Right. So she'll still throw the kick. She'll still try and, use her striking at distance. But a lot of times what Rose Namajunas is attempting to do is either defend a takedown, use her own takedown to get on top, or land strikes on the feet at distance. So this seems to me like a difficult fight for Tracy Cortez in some ways, right? For me, it's predicated on the takedown. If Tracy Cortez is able to get takedowns early and often in this fight, she's probably going to have a lot of success because we haven't seen Rose put in those dangerous positions lately. But when she has been put in suboptimal positions, things have gone very sideways for her at times in the past. I even think back to the Jillian Robertson grappling match that she had. That was basically a foregone conclusion, right? And Jillian Robertson, a little bit of a tweener in her own right between 115, 125 pounds. So shout out to Dixon. He just brought that up in the comments, and I was mentioning it myself. Did you ever see the BJJ match between Robertson and Rose? Absolutely. And so the things that happen here for me when I start to conceptualize this fight is, number one, I think we're going to be grappling a lot in this fight more often than not. And the reason I feel that way is Tracy Cortez tends to push the wrestling and the grappling. Last time out, she's got Jasmine Jasudavicious, who's a big girl, strong at 125 pounds, wants to wrestle, wants to grapple, doesn't have very good striking defense. So when you have that kind of opponent in front of you, you're going to want to strike with them, right? And when Tracy Cortez was out there striking, she was having a lot of success against Jasudavicious in the wrestling and the grappling. The physicality actually gave her some issues. She was getting taken down. She was getting put in some suboptimal positions in the second round. So when I'm looking at their footage, I'm impressed broadly by Tracy Cortez, but she's not a proven finisher. And when you have a 5-round fight scheduled and it's at altitude and you weren't preparing for it, and it's against the best opponent of your career, there does start to be a number of things working against her in this matchup, right? I think that Tracy Cortez is very solid. She's on an 11-fight win streak. She beat Erin Blanchfield. Very close, very competitive decision. And the thing that's hard to come away from that fight and say, she looked like head and shoulders above Blanchfield. She did not. But she was able to compete position for position. She was in a deep armbar for about 4 minutes, didn't give up, didn't tap, didn't make any mistakes, stayed calm, stayed positionally sound. And when she got submitted in her first ever, pro fight, a lot of fighters can get derailed by that early loss. She's been able to work through that, right? She's been in a bunch of deep submission attempts since then. She's been able to survive and work through it. I think that Tracy Cortez makes more mistakes than Rose Namajunas, just broadly speaking. but she's also aggressive. She's also tenacious. She also does a lot, right? When she's out there, she's attempting strikes. She's attempting takedowns. She's trying to make somebody fight her for the entire time. And I've seen her take a lot of clean punches right to the chin and just keep on tanking forward, keep showing that will, that resolve. So I think that for Rose Namajunas, she hasn't finished a fight in some time. Let me go back and look at the record. So we pulled up Rose's topology here. The last time she finished a fight was when she head kicked Zhang Weili back in 2021. I would say that she has the most chance to win a fight by knockout that she's had in some time here. And it's just because when you look at Manon Fiorot, she's a dedicated striker, right? She's very defensively responsible. The only real damage that Rose was able to create in that fight was a clash of heads, right? Where Manon started bleeding like a stuck pig out the side of her head. Then when you look at, what we've seen from her other fights, right? She rematched Zhang Weili. She did not seem like she was close to finishing that fight. It was a competitive decision. She was able to get the win. I thought that Zhang Weili won that fight. Then when you look at the Manon Fiorot fight, she breaks her finger in the first round, and her corner tried to get her back on track. They tried to refocus her, and it was hard for them to do. She was on enemy soil. She's taking on a tough opponent, and it just didn't go her way, right? She gets an early injury, but she did try and battle her way back. I thought she looked, solid enough in the third round there. Then you look at the Amanda Ribas fight, and I really think that Amanda kind of blew that fight. She made a lot of bad decisions in that fight, trying to force the grappling at times when it wasn't there, when she was landing pretty well on the feet. And that does make me think to myself, if Tracy Cortez is tough, durable, doesn't get hurt in this fight, doesn't make a catastrophic decision, I do think that this is going to be very close on the cards. When you look at what Tracy was able to do in her last fight, I did think it was impressive the amount of output that we saw from her. So I'm pulling back up the results, right? Tracy's last fight, she landed 103 significant strikes. And that's particularly impressive to me because she got controlled for 3 minutes by Jasmine Jasudavicious. So she was getting taken down and controlled for most of the second round. She was still able to land 100 plus significant strikes. And Jasmine also cheated in that fight. If you guys go back and watch, she has braids, right? Her hair is braided up. Jasmine grabs it and just knees her in the head, kicks her in the head, a couple fouls in a row. And Tracy stops what she's doing, gives her a lecture for it, and then goes back to striking. So she's the kind of girl that is not afraid to get into a gritty fight, but I do think that she's defensively liable. I do think that Rose is going to have opportunities to hit her clean, to land big, impactful strikes, and especially if she's not getting takedowns. So the things that kind of stood out to me when I was just looking over the prop market here, the fight not to go the distance. Every women's main event seems to go the distance. But when you're just looking at how these two women match up, number one, altitude is a factor. Tracy Cortez never been 5 rounds. She's been scheduled 5 rounds 0 times in her career. I went back and looked. You have a natural flyweight here in Tracy Cortez, who's never fought below flyweight, as best I could tell from her topology. I think she's even fought as high as 135 pounds. And meanwhile, Rose is a former strawweight fighter. So you've got an interesting weight dynamic there. You've got 2 women that have both lost via submission before in their career. And for, Tracy Cortez, obviously it was her pro debut, but it is something where it's not like she hasn't been in difficult grappling situations since then, right? Melissa Gatto took her back. She's had a couple moments of lapse, vulnerability. Erin Blanchfield almost took her arm home with her as well. So very solid opponents. I'm not taking anything away from her there. And when you look at the people that she's defeated, many of them have solid records, but she just doesn't have the same kind of longevity, the same kind of testing that Rose has had in the promotion. So I don't feel great about a side here. If I had to make a, approximate line based on where I'm at right now, I would probably make Rose a deserved favorite, but I would probably put her at about a -150 here, based on her championship and 5-round experience, based on her ability to be dangerous in all positions. The fact that it's in Colorado, home match for Rose Namajunas, I think all of that is helpful for her. However, I don't think Tracy Cortez is dead letter here. I think if she's getting takedowns, she could be a real problem for Rose Namajunas. She keeps a high pace rate and pressure on her opponents in fights. And when we've seen Rose break in the past, that's typically been, part of the puzzle, right? Getting on her, staying in her face, keeping pressure on. And for all the credit that you want to give Rose for her 5-round experience, which she does deserve, we've also seen fights where the 3-round fight with Jessica Andrade, everything was going sideways for her in that 3rd round. She had the round of her life against Jessica Andrade, when she got knocked out and slammed on her head as well. So I just think that we've seen, layers of both of these fighters that could challenge the other. And so Rose is a little bit more proven. She's not an old woman by any means. She's young. She still has a lot of experience. She's very marketable in her own right. Both of these women, very marketable. But I have to feel like, Rose is the more popular known name, right? She's got a lot of experience. She is a household UFC name. The thing is, though, as a favorite, she hasn't really given you that return on investment. One thing about Rose, she's been underrated her whole career, right? When she's been an underdog, she's produced over and over and over again. She's just blown people out of the water in that underdog position. But when people start to get too bullish on Rose, that's when things start to go sideways. Carla Esparza, that's an example that comes to mind. Did Carla Esparza, guys, earn that win? Right? Did Carla Esparza do something special? Did she go out there and show a new layer to her game? None of those things happened. She just was there. They both did nothing, and the fight was over. They had to raise somebody's hand. They raised Carla Esparza's hand. So that's the thing that keeps me off laying chalk with somebody like Rose Namajunas, right? She's a good fighter at her best. At home in Denver, maybe we see just a flashback to her championship level performances. But for me, what I don't want to do is get caught over my skis, right? Getting too excited about Rose, because that historically has been where she's been a letdown, to her fans and to her backers, right? Is when everybody is all gung-ho on Rose. So shout out to Rose. She did win last time in a similar price range against Amanda Hebos, and I picked against her there. So, still feeling the sting of that one, guys. But I think for me, right now, I'm going to lean ever so slightly to Rose Namajunas. But I think there could be some value on the ends by sub on the fight not to go the distance. Those are a couple of the ways I'm thinking about this. So good fight, good scrap, and I'll do a little bit more tape, a little bit more due diligence. I think that Tracy has a path in the grappling, but I just think that if she's not able to get takedowns, she's probably a little bit more open on the feet. Although I wasn't blown away by Rose's striking in her last fight. Wow, that's interesting. Cole says, I was watching Helwani the other day. Tracy talked about being in a fairly bad vehicle accident. Don't love to hear that. Yeah, I also don't love to hear that. Tracy over 30, isn't she? Yes, she is over 30. I think she just turned 30. She is the younger party in this fight. No, she's approaching 31. So about halfway to 31. So yeah, it's an interesting fight. And both these women could use a big win. I think the division could use a new contender. So in that way, I think Tracy Cortez winning would be good for the sport and the division. But Rose Namajunas may not go softly into that good night. She's proven that she's been one of the toughest outs in recent years for WMMA. And even though I wasn't blown away by her last performance, she went out there and earned another win. She did it in this division at 125 pounds. She did it over 5 rounds. And Tracy Cortez just hasn't had a chance to prove that yet. So I think her cardio has looked all right. But I do think her cardio has shown, some instances where she's flagging off a little bit towards the end of that 3rd round. And if that's the case, it's going to be difficult to compete over 5 at elevation. Next up, guys, we got a fight where I'm going to keep my thoughts on this one a lot more brief. I don't think I'll be having a betting side on this fight. Muslim Salikhov sitting at about a plus 170 underdog. Shout out to our friends over at Fight Numbers, guys. I'll give you the odds for the main event and the co-main event here as we move it forward. Rose Namajunas, minus 200 over on BetMGM, best available price. Tracy Cortez, the comeback, plus 193 on the underdog. That is available at Pinnacle Sportsbook. I am quoting the best prices from our friends over at Fight Numbers. If you guys are looking to invest in your MMA information, whether that's odds information, whether that's DFS projections from John Kelly, go ahead and subscribe over at Fight Numbers. Use my promo code Liam, and they will hook you up. And all the information you need for that, guys, is down in the description box below. Thank you to Fight Numbers for the support. As we were saying, though, we're on to the co-main event where Santiago Ponzinibbio, the Argentine dagger, is sitting minus 180 over on BetOnline, and you're looking at a plus 170 comeback on Bet365 for Muslim Salikhov. the way I see this fight is pretty simple. You've got two guys that are both approaching 40, right? 38 years of age, according to the book Fightnomics, is the rate where skyrocketing knockouts start to happen in terms of your losses. 38-year-old fighters and over. Muslim Salikhov is at that point of no return. He's 40 years of age, right? He's been knocked out in several of these recent performances. So I don't think he's a bad fighter, but I think he is a fighter who's past his sell-by date. I think he's a fighter that at his best had some vulnerabilities in his game. And I think that right now, I can't trust a guy like Muslim Salikhov to go out there and fight hard for my dollars. He just got splattered by Randy Brown. That was a tough loss. The Nicholas Dalby fight, Nicholas Dalby's not an easy out for anybody. But again, a tough loss there. Beating Andre Fialho, what does that really tell us? Andre Fialho's chin, one of the most tested in UFC history. And then I had 10 units, guys. 10 units. Very big bet for me. I think I've only done it like 10 times in my life. But I had 10 units on the Leech against Muslim Salikhov at plus money. He had every advantage, I felt like, on paper. Thought he was a better striker. I thought he could compete in the grappling. I thought that he was a more powerful guy. I thought he was more athletic. I thought he was bigger. And he ended up finishing Muslim Salikhov as well. So you see Muslim Salikhov, he's just been on a really rough run lately. And I don't think Santiago Ponzinibbio has an Andre Fialho chin. So I think he's probably going to win this fight. Does that mean I want to go out there and bet minus 180, minus 200 on a 37-year-old Santiago Ponzinibbio who, did get knocked out in his last fight by Kevin Holland, who's got a brick for a head and who's pretty dangerous? Do I want to do that? I don't think so. But he did beat Alex Morono in a fight he was losing all the minutes. He did knock him out. He lost to Michel Demoledor Pereira via split decision. I mean, that actually is a loss that's aged like fine wine. Almost everybody else getting splattered in the first round by Michel Pereira lately. Jeff Neal lost a split decision there. That's another guy who's a contemporary contender. He went to split decision, I believe, with Ian Gary as well. So tough guys. He lost to the Leech via knockout in the first round. Tough one there. But again, the Leech, dangerous guy, very powerful. That was a comeback after a huge long layoff for Ponzinibbio. And then the Miguel Baeza fight, the fact that he didn't knock him out, maybe not the greatest look, but he did, put a beating on that guy and honestly probably changed his career. So you look at Santiago Ponzinibbio, I think he's had a better run overall. He's 11-6 in the promotion. And you're looking at a guy like Muslim Salikhov. He's 6-4 in the UFC. He's had less longevity. He's less marketable. He's the older guy. I don't like anything about him here. So yeah, I think Ponzi wins this one. And I honestly think he's going to knock out Muslim Salikhov, but I don't feel great about the fight. All righty, guys. Next up, we've got Drew Dober taking on John Silva, Lord Assassin. This is a weird one. Drew Dober, a guy I respect, but a guy who I have been noting his chin has been on the decline in his recent run. He's a guy that gets a lot of love and respect because he's got so many knockouts. But in this fight, it seems like people aren't giving him that love and respect. It's normally me on an island. I picked Matt Frivola against Drew Dober, and people thought I was crazy, right? And then Matt Frivola was able to get the win. Renato Moicano, that was the one where, Drew Dober kind of gave that one away. It was a fight where it looked like it was well within reach for him to win it, and he made a couple mistakes. His grappling has always been suspect in terms of where he has been vulnerable throughout his career. His chin has normally been a highlight, something that's very solid. 11-2 career to the knockout. Got knocked out by Matt Frivola. Prior to that, he had not been finished with strikes since, it must have been Chase Hackett or Brandon Gertz or somebody back in the day, because I can't even find it on Tapology. So you look at a guy like Drew Dober, and he's been very hard to finish with strikes historically. Now he's got a featherweight in Gene Silva on the other side, who clearly has power in his hands. He did become the first man to stop, Charles Jourdain in his last fight. Now, Charles Jourdain, if you guys remember, I mentioned on the show as well, I ended up overthinking the Gene Silva and Charles Jourdain fight because Gene Silva missed weight. I was like, is something going on with this guy? Now he's fighting at 155 2 weeks after. So it does tell you this is a guy that maybe cutting the weight is not his first priority. He just wants to get in there and scrap, make the money, take on the challenges, whatever he needs to do to advance his career. So fair play to him. He's 2-0 now in the UFC, beat Weston Wilson, made weight for that one, missed weight for the Charles Jourdain fight. But I did mention Charles Jourdain, he's a guy, that has been dropped a few times in the UFC. So it was always a matter of time until he got knocked out, until he got finished. He had been hurt before. So shout out to our guy Dixon, says, Liam, did you watch the interview Gene Silva did on Hanato's Show Me the Money pod that dropped today? Very interesting. You should watch if you haven't. I haven't yet. I will watch that. Listen, I think Gene Silva is an interesting guy. I think that he's a dangerous guy. I think he comes from a great camp with the fighting nerds. I respect a lot of what they do. I think that they come in with good game plans. Gene Silva had a cleaner fight and a cleaner win against Weston Wilson than Joe Anderson Brito. And Joe Anderson Brito is a good fighter, a guy who gets a lot of respect from odds makers and otherwise. Then you look at a guy like Jourdain. Say what you will about Charles Jourdain, but he's a very experienced UFC guy. He's now 6-7-1 in the promotion. So not a above 500 record. He just went below 500 fighting our guy, Gene Silva, but he is a guy that's had a lot of longevity. And when I'm looking at a guy like Drew Dober, you have to have a lot of reverence and respect for a 13-9 record in the UFC in this very tough division of lightweight. But we're also seeing, a couple losses on his record that aren't so great, right? Like the Brad Riddell loss for me is one that leaves me scratching my head a little bit about Drew Dober because Brad Riddell was able to swim there. He was able to go to his, takedowns as like a way to beat Drew Dober. And for me, that was a little bit alarming, right? Bobby Green, he doesn't have that willingness. He's not going to take the fight to the ground. He's not going to do that. Rafael Alves, he was a guy that was willing to fight exactly like Drew Dober wants to, right? I throw, you throw, we're both swanging and banging and having a crazy brawl. Drew Dober was loving that fight. And Rafael Alves landed good shots, but he slows down substantially over time. Terrence McKinney, guys, if people forget, Terrence McKinney, he was very close to finishing Drew Dober in the first round there, lit him up, landed huge shots. It looked like he was going to be the guy to crack that chin. And then Drew Dober is a soldier, man. He was able to come back, and just find his offense. But I think of a guy like Drew Dober, and I say to myself, his best years are probably behind him. He's still a guy who's dangerous. He's going to go out there and put on fun, marketable fights. But it is a guy that has put his chin on the line for a long time. He's fought a very high level of competition. You look at the wins that he's had that have aged well. I think Bobby Green is the best one on his recent ledger. But Ricky Glenn has been on hard times lately in the UFC. You look at his record, he's 4-5 in the promotion, rocking that negative record. So a lot of these guys that he's been able to get over on lately, Rafael Alves cut from the promotion, Terrence McKinney, he's got to have a negative record. No, 5-4 in the UFC. Shout out to Terrence McKinney, hanging on by a thin thread to that 500 record. But I think that, you look at a guy like Gene Silva, and he's got fast hands. He's got powerful uppercuts. I don't know that he's going to mix in a tremendous amount of kicking. He did get hit by Kevin Vallejos a decent amount as well, if my memory serves, when they fought. So let me pull up the stats here, because this is a tricky fight. I think that this fight should be around a pick 'em. And according to our friends over at Fight Numbers, that's what you're looking at, guys. Gene Silva, -105, small chalk, BetMGM, -103 on Betfair for Drew Dober. Shout out to Bravia in the chat. Says Dober's 100% going for the KO. He gets the lightweight KO record if he gets a knockout in his hometown, which is where he trains out of. I agree. That is an interesting note. I do think he's going to be going for it. Shout out to Chugozera third, says Gene was on Moicano's podcast and explained that Rufy was offered this fight but couldn't make 155, so he took the fight instead. He said the weight miss was an accident. Fair play. I mean, I would hope it was an accident, right? Gene is fighting at 155, then moving back down to 145. So, I mean, listen, I think that for making money, for, having fun fights, for going out there and giving yourself opportunity, this is a fine move by Gene Silva. It's pretty low risk. If he does get beat here, he says, hey, it's 155 pounds. It's not my right weight class. I'm going back to 145 and I'll do great down there. I do think it gives you kind of an exit clause, a little bit of plausible deniability, an excuse, for lack of a better word. So I think that this is not a fight where I want to get caught out over my skis, right? Last time out, I said I thought Gene Silva was a good underdog play, and then I didn't take it, and he cashed as a dog. Now, I feel like a lot of people saw that, and they're like, Gene Silva is the guy. And he just might be, but it's almost a prove it spot here, right? At 155 against a tough, proven UFC guy who's fought a lot of really high level fighters at 155. It does seem like a big ask, and I don't think it's above him. Like, I think he can go out there and get this win, but I do think on short notice, quick turnaround, it's a lot to ask. So, if you see plus money on either side in this fight, I think that's fine. But I'm probably leaning towards the Drew Dober side here. I got to think about it more, though. Tricky fight. It should be lined close. Both these guys are tough, and I think the grappling upside is probably with John Silva, but I think Aussie Fight Fan hits the nail on the head. Dober been fighting UFC level fighters for 10 years. I'll take the trusted vet at even money. If he was 38, I'd be out. But at 35, with only a handful of knockout losses in his career, I do think it's an interesting angle. Shout out to Bravi as well. Says, in my opinion, it's Silva round 1. Otherwise, Dober because of the preparation and altitude. Yeah, I think that's a great point. When you think about the fighters who are used to training at altitude, I mean, nobody gets better than Drew Dober in that regard. He lives and trains at altitude. So let's see if he has better fight IQ than the Moicano fight. Next up, guys, we got Gabriel Bonfim taking on Ange Loosa. And this is a funny one because, Ange Loosa is definitely like the most hated guy on the card, right? Like everybody is, swearing off Ange Loosa. I can't believe he quit last time out. And he did, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. I thought he quit last time against Brian Battle. You get poked in the eye and want to go back out there against Brian Battle. I wouldn't. But I also think the writing was on the wall. I think we all know who was going to win that fight. I think Brian Battle, it was only a matter of time before he was going to finish. Now, I think that the way you target Bonfim at minus 400 is Bonfim by KO. Shout out to Moy's Audio. I do think we've seen a number of times, guys. I mentioned this before my Brian Battle breakdown. We've seen a number of times where Ange Loosa has gotten hit in the UFC and started time traveling. Okay. And what I mean by that is Ange Loosa gets punched in the chin and you'll see him look off in the distance like something's going on. Like he's waiting for a bus to come that's never coming. And then he'll come back. But he hasn't been finished with strikes. He's just been waiting for the bus, looking around, has no idea where he's at. AJ Fletcher fought him at altitude in Salt Lake City. And I cashed on Ange Loosa in that fight. Guys, it was one of the craziest fights ever. They both were so out on their feet at one point that they're swinging. Ange Loosa's waiting for the bus. AJ Fletcher shoots a takedown, and Ange Loosa literally falls on top of him, and they end the round for 1 minute just with Ange Loosa laying on top, grabbing his ankles and hoping nothing happens. Such a funny fight in retrospect, but it does tell you this. Ange Loosa can find a way to win at altitude, right? Ange Loosa was completely exhausted, but he found a way to win. Ange Loosa had basically the fight in the bag against Reese McKee, and then almost got knocked out in the third round. He got rocked late. So if you had to criticize Ange Loosa, the things that you could criticize are, number one, he kind of quit that last fight. So not a great look there. Number two, he can be cracked on the chin. Not ideal. But then you look at, all right, this guy has been to decision. This guy has been difficult to finish. Jack Della Maddalena, I think we all agree, dangerous guy, right? He can go out there and hurt people. He can knock you out. Ask Gilbert Burns, right till the bitter end. Jack Della is staying violent, trying to find ways to win the fight. Ange Loosa lasted the whole 15 minutes with him. So we've seen Ange Loosa be in some dangerous situations, but we haven't seen him take the easy way out every time. We saw him do it once, and it was legal and above board, right? He had an excuse, and he took it. But when you look, MMA fans are a fickle bunch, right? Think about Anthony Smith, right? Everybody talks about Anthony Smith. This guy's so stupid. He should have taken that free win against John Jones. He could have gotten the rematch for the title. He could have been a UFC champion if he just stayed down. The other half of the fan base says, Anthony Smith, respect to him for staying down or for not staying down. Respect for him for getting back up and fighting John. You know what that respect got him? No extra money. And then 2 years later, they call him delusional. This is the fight fan, right? They're very fickle. So when you're Ange Loosa, your choices are, I can either continue to stand here, get my ass whooped by Brian Battle, get an official loss on my record, open myself up to be cut from the promotion, which happens if you lose fights, or I could get another fight by just saying, no, I can't see. That's it. Thanks anyways. What choice would you make under that duress in those circumstances? I think everybody knows it's a lot easier said from your couch than making the decision inside the octagon. Now, for Gabriel Bonfim, here's the one pause and the one hesitation I have. Do I think he's a very serious grappler? Yeah. He's a dangerous guy. His guillotine is phenomenal. I really enjoy his, his series, right? But here's the danger for me. He's had one fight that he had in the UFC, I believe, that made it out of the first round. He lost that fight. In his career, he's only been out of the first round a handful of times. He's got a couple second round finishes, a third round finish, but he's a guy that's mostly just gotten out there and got his work done fast. And we've never seen Ange Loosa get put away. So then the question becomes this. I fight at elevation, right? I'm taking on a guy in Ange Loosa who has been difficult to put away. If I go out there and spend everything early, I might be exhausted the rest of the way out and have nothing left. If I go out there and don't spend everything early, I may just give Ange Loosa a more winnable fight. So it does become a little bit difficult tactically to understand how is he going to approach this one. And for Bonfim, I think his striking is still a little bit of a question mark for me. Most of the time he's getting it done with his grappling quickly. So I just want to see a little bit more of his extended fights. And the thing about Dalby beating him is there's no shame in losing to Dalby. He's a good fighter. I bet Nicholas Dalby in that fight. I thought he was going to win. But the thing that was mildly alarming for me was that Bonfim had an adrenaline dump, and he basically just folded up the tent in the second round there. He was getting beat up to the body and loses the fight. That is the only stoppage win for Nicholas Dalby in 13 or 14 UFC appearances. So Dalby's had a lot of fights. He's had a lot of opportunities. He's fought tough guys, but he's only finished one guy ever in the UFC, and it is Gabriel Bonfim. And sometimes when you have these guys that are really impressive, that are really shiny as like a promotional guy, and they lose one time, sometimes their confidence takes a big blow. And for me, when you're at home in Brazil and everybody's there rooting for you and you get finished and kind of beat up by a guy you were supposed to beat and you were a huge favorite against, that's like a pivot point. You can either use that as fuel motivation. I'm back in the room. I'm back on the bike. I'm figuring it all out. I'm solving my problems. Or it could become a pattern, right? Losing can become a habit. And so I'm just wanting to see Bonfim go out there and react, get back on track before I go trust him at a -400 price tag when we've seen Ange Loosa win as a dog before. He hasn't been very productive as an underdog, but he's won as a dog before. And we've seen Bonfim go out there in a big price range with a lot of confidence and conviction from the public, shit the bed before. And now a guy that gassed out, in more optimal circumstances, let's say, last time against Dalby in Brazil, now he's got to do this at elevation, right? So to get off the -400 price tag, I think the upside is, hey, Ange Loosa hasn't been put away. Maybe Bonfim goes out there and makes a statement, puts him away with a big knockout. I think that's very possible. But I think on the other side of things here, Ange Loosa, when he has 15 minutes to compete, let's just go look at the stats. Because I know Bryan Battle was whooping his ass. There's no doubt about that. But in that fight, guys, Ange Loosa was down 23-27 on the significant strike totals. And on the total strike count, let's pull up the total strike count. 28-26. Bryan Battle was up on Ange Loosa. He was not running away with it on the strike count. Was he doing more damage? Yes. Was he landing the better shots? Yes. Did he have better body language? All of that is absolutely true. I bet Battle rounds 2, Battle round 3, I really thought it was going to be an easy cleanup. Ange Loosa against Reese McKee, 3-round fight, 98 significant strikes and 6 takedowns. Against AJ Fletcher, 129 significant strikes and 2 takedowns. That's just not bad, right? Now, I will mention common opponent, right? They have a common opponent, and Ange Loosa lost to Munir Lazzez via unanimous decision. Munir Lazzez put up 141 significant strikes to Ange Loosa's 88 in that contest. Same thing against Jack Della. He got outlanded 108-64. He took huge strikes in that fight and did not get finished, in fairness. Then you look at Munir Lazzez, takes on Gabriel Bonfim, gets submitted in the very first round. They were both at 9 strikes apiece. That's the real danger, is that guillotine choke is sensational. Bonfim is fantastic with that maneuver. So, yeah, I actually said that. I said that, buddy. But in any case, this is a fight where, I think that Gabriel Bonfim deserved favorite. Absolutely. But I'd put him at -200, -225, something like that. I just don't think Ange Loosa is a complete pushover. But 3 losses, mounting negative publicity after that last performance. He's got to do something special here. Next up, guys, we got Christian C-Rod Rodriguez taking on Julian Erosa. And I really respect C-Rod. I think he's a great fighter. When he came into the UFC, he's a guy that took a short notice opportunity, right? Comes in, fights Jonathan Pierce. That's a tough fight. And he had gotten a win on Contender Series against Reyes Cortez back in the day. I believe I bet him at a -190 price tag against Reyes Cortez. He looked very good in that fight. He was coming off the Charlampos Gregorio win. So you see Reyes Cortez, a guy who's been fringe, level. He's been on the Contender Series multiple times. You see a guy in Charlampos Gregorio who just made it to the UFC as well, fought my guy Chad and Hellinger. We see Raul Rosas Jr., very hype prospect, a guy who's gotten back on track in a big way since losing to Christian Rodriguez. Well, C-Rod was able to win that fight as well. Cameron Simon, was it as dominant and explosive as Peyton Talbot? No, it was not. However, it was still a great win. He missed weight for both those contests, though, and that's what sent him up to 145 pounds, right? And when you get a guy up at 145 pounds, you got a guy, in C-Rod who has lost to Pierce at 145. He looked like he was a little bit undersized there. He looked like he was physically a little bit outmatched at points in that fight, but he still had moments. He still competed. He showed that he wasn't completely, out over the skis. Then you look at the Isaac Dulgarian fight. Guys, I came away so impressed by both guys in that fight. They both went out there to scrap. You see a guy in Isaac Dulgarian who is very strong. He's very good at wrestling. He knows positionally what he wants. And he's one of the most dominant first-round fighters I've seen in all my time taping mixed martial arts fights. And I had said on this show very confidently, I was like 100%, this guy is going to win the first round against C-Rod. And it wasn't because I don't respect C-Rod. It's because C-Rod sometimes is a little bit negative to start his fights. You know what I'm saying? If you watch, there's been times when C-Rod kind of comes out, just lets the fight flow a little bit, starts letting the guy into the fight. Even Raul Rosas Jr., right? If you think back to that fight, Raul Rosas Jr. got to some good positions. He had the back. He's in some good spots. But C-Rod just staying calm, staying patient. And as soon as you start to elevate your heart rate, and as soon as you start to, think to yourself, hey, what do I have to do to this guy? How do I get this guy out of here? He starts to turn up the heat more and more. He's a very good slow cooker. That's what I call it, right? By round 3, most guys don't want to be in there with him no more because he stays calm, he stays patient, he stays dangerous. And when I think about the Dulgarian fight, shout out to my guy Moy's Audio. He says clear 10-8 round 1. Now, I tend to agree with you, but here's the one thing that gives me pause, right? And I actually messaged Isaac because I respect him so much. I respect his game. Dulgarian can wrestle. Guys, he's a hammer on top. I thought he made a tactical error against C-Rod, which is that every time he's on top, he is, looking for submission. He's chaining these attacks together. And I was like, C-Rod is too good, too tough. He's not going to tap unless you have him dead to rights completely. Nothing he could do. Everything is screwed. So this guy is a real gamer. You have to put him unconscious with a choke or he's not going to give it to you. And I'm just like, why are we trying to put him unconscious when we could be in top position trying to drop elbows, trying to slam home these big shots? When Dulgarian went to his offensive elbows, he was having some success, but he wasn't continuing with it. And so I think that if that fight was rerun and Isaac Dulgarian went out there with the intent to just take him down, get to the mount, and ground and pound, he could have finished the fight. But he didn't do that. He tried to make it more of a grappling match. He tried to get more technical and more positional. And honestly, I think number one, that tired him out. When you try and squeeze chokes, it's exhausting. So he tried 3, 4, 5 really serious chokes and didn't get him. But the other thing you have to consider is this. When you have a guy like C-Rod, you want to finish him early because the longer you leave him opportunities out there, the more chance that things are going to go sideways. And I thought that going for the chokes, I get it. But I would have tactically, if I was trying to coach him, I would have said, Isaac, do damage because that's going to pay more dividends later in the fight. Because the thing is, if I try and squeeze your head off and you are like trying to defend getting your head squeezed off, we're both going to come away from that very tired. Whereas if I damage you with a bunch of elbows to the face, it's going to do a lot more lasting impact that's negative for you than it is for me. Even if I get a little bit more tired, you're tired and damaged, right? So for me, this is a spot where I think C-Rod's being put in a favorable matchup, right? I think they're trying to get this guy a win. I think they're trying to get him a finish. It's not going to be easy, right? You got a savvy guy who's got 14 fights under his belt in Julian Erosa, but he's not a guy that they're trying to push for a title shot. He's not a guy that they're trying to position as a future contender. He's a guy that's a UFC gamer. He goes out there, he puts on a hard, solid fight with anybody. And I think that C-Rod right now, he's been the prospect killer, right? Like, he goes out there, beats Bulgarian. I mean, whether you want to call it a draw or not, all right, let's say it's a draw. Then he goes out there and draws with one of the toughest first-round fighters in the UFC today, period. Like, just like from what we've seen, this guy, Bulgarian, in round one is a fucking hammer. He destroyed Francis Marshall instantly. He absolutely decimated every opponent he had regionally instantly. And then C-Rod, meanwhile, is able to deal with that and just absolutely cooked him to the bone. Late in that fight, guys, Bulgarian was hanging on by a thread. And I say this as a fan, as somebody who really respects him, but we've all been there. If you've wrestled, if you've grappled, if you've been in a fight, you know what exhaustion really feels like. When you start to get so exhausted and you're like, how can I keep going? There's still 2 minutes left. Like 2 minutes is now an eternity to me. And for C-Rod, you know, his finishing instincts are the one thing I'd say that he needs to improve, right? He has good skills. He's dangerous everywhere. But the only finish he has so far in the UFC is against Joshua Weems, who just frankly didn't deserve to be in there with him. And even if you look back, Reyes Cortez, guys, had no business being in there with C-Rod, and he wasn't able to finish him. This seems like a fight that was booked to get C-Rod a win and a finishable opponent. He does have size that he's giving up in this fight, right? Way bigger is Juicy J. Way longer in the reach is Juicy J. So it's not going to be easy, but 8 years younger for Christian Rodriguez. I think he's the more talented guy. I think he's the more dangerous guy. So give me Christian Rodriguez. I think he's going to win this fight via knockout, and that's the way I see it going down. All right. Next up, guys, we got Cody Brundage taking on Abdul Razak Al-Hassan. Abdul, unfortunately, is up there in age, right? Abdul is sitting at 38 years of age, guys, going on 39. That is quite old for the UFC, for this middleweight division. I suppose a little bit more forgiving. He is on a one-loss streak right now, coming off of a submission loss to Joe Pyfer. And we did have Joe Pyfer in that fight by submission. Very happy to see that one shake out the way we were hoping, the way we were expecting. Meanwhile, he defeated Claudio Ribeiro, who was very, very not good at fighting, guys. If you look at Claudio Ribeiro, he is 1-3 in the UFC. I believe he's been cut from the promotion. He was finished in all of his losses. His only win was over Joseph Holmes. So for me, those were not great looks, right? Joaquin Buckley losing the split decision there is fine for Abdul Razak, but he did get taken down in that fight. If my memory serves, his defensive wrestling has been a choke point throughout his career. Joe Pyfer, again, able to expose that defensive wrestling. He knocked out Alessio Di Chirico in the first round. He knocked out Claudio Ribeiro in the second round, but his susceptibility to leg kicks is there. Jacob Malkoun was able to easily wrestle him to a decision. Chaos Williams hit him with a right hand from Hades, put him in the absolute box. Munir Lazez, he lost a decision there as well. And he also missed weight. That was back at 170 pounds. So you're seeing a guy in Abdul Razak Al-Hassan who just hasn't put together many quality wins lately. I'm seeing as well that he's withdrawn from a couple of these fights. Bruno Ferreira, he withdrew from. Jamie Pickett, he withdrew from. You know something was wrong if he withdrew from the Jamie Pickett fight. So now we're looking at a Cody Brundage who I don't really, get behind. I don't really typically like to back, but I did take the under in the Zach Reese fight, and he was able to cash there. That win is aged all right. Zach Reese went out there and absolutely dispatched of who was that? Goodness, I'm drawing a blank. Julian Marquez, that's who it was. He just absolutely dispatched Julian Marquez in the first round. Then you see Jacob Malkoun. He stole one from him, just robbed him blind. I had said on my show prior, I was like, yeah, Cody Brundage has to be the money line side, just because when you're dealing with minus 600s in MMA, it's a stupid sport. And there it is, right? It's stupid sport. Clearly the better guy. If they reran it again, he'd probably be minus 1,000. But it's the reason why I don't really get caught laying those huge chalk prices very often in MMA, because it's too volatile. It's too silly. The myriad things that could go wrong, from injuries to your own fighter getting themselves disqualified, like Jacob Malkoun, like Pierre Rodriguez, just recent examples. Then you look back, he loses to Cedric Dumas and got out wrestled and out grappled. And for me, that's a huge indictment, right? Like, how are you getting out wrestled and out grappled by a guy who's not a wrestler, right? By his trade, right? He's a kickboxer. If you watch his old regional footage for Cedric Dumas. So I think that Cody Brundage is kind of not good at anything, right? He's a dangerous enough guy. He's got some power in his hands naturally. He's got a half decent guillotine. But let's just talk about the quality of his wins. He beat Tresean Gore, who I'm not sure. He's 1-2 in the UFC, Tresean Gore, and he really has struggled to make it to the octagon consistently. He's only 4-2 overall as a professional. So he fought a very inexperienced Tresean Gore and was able to get the knockout there. He submitted Dolce Lungiambula in a fight that he was losing pretty soundly up until that point and looked to be in a lot of danger. He got finished by William Knight in the first round, which is no bueno. He got beat by Nick Maximoff, who's been cut from the UFC. He got out-wrestled and out-grappled there. He got out-wrestled and out-grappled by Michal Oleksiejczuk, guys. Go back and rewatch that fight. So, yeah, I can't get behind Cody Brundage. This is probably just a fight that I'm going to be passing on. Cody Brundage is the underdog here, according to our friends over at Fight Numbers. The last two fights that we've discussed, we've got Julian Erosa plus 194 underdog taking on minus 214 at Betfair, Christian Rodriguez, and we've got Abdul Razak Al Hassan in this matchup. He's sitting at a minus 160 over on Superbook Sports. You're looking at a plus 146 on Betfair, the comeback on Cody Brundage. So I think that, Abdul is a guy that has been training at altitude, but he doesn't typically have a great, fight over the course of 15 minutes, right? He's 0-4 in his career to decisions. The fact that he went to split decision with Buckley, though, is kind of interesting because, Cody Brundage has been losing decisions at the UFC level. He's 0-2 in decisions in the UFC. So I wonder what the props look like on this fight. I think Abdul Razak, his biggest danger in this fight actually may be getting knocked out in the first round. Cody could out-grapple him, I suppose, to a decision, but Cody is really just not a very proven fighter in fights that go long. He's 1-2 to the decision. Abdul Razak's 0-4 to the decision, but a lot of his came against, higher level guys. Looking back, let's see here. Abdul Razak by decision is plus 850. Interesting. Chaos Williams with KO, both of them on the same night. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. This is just a pretty terrible fight. God bless them both. I think Abdul Razak is a more fun fighter, so I'd like to see him win. But, shout out to Cody Brundage, still doing the damn thing. I haven't been impressed by Cody Brundage at all. Next up, guys, we got Joshua Van taking on Charles Johnson. And this is a matchup that is actually a really good fight. I'm surprised that this is not higher up on the card. This is a prelim. It should be on the main card for sure. You've got Josh Van, who is a top prospect, I would say, right now in the flyweight division. He's still just 22 years of age, which is shocking. For a kid who's so young, born in 2001, he's a hammer. 8-win streak right now as a professional, 10-1 as a pro, 3-0 in the UFC. You look at the quality of wins that he has, not very high. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, definitely his best career win to date. Most experienced guy. He fought very close decision. I did think he deserved to win it. I thought he took over in rounds 2 and 3. If we had to criticize Joshua Van, who is very talented, I think the one thing you could say is typically he's giving away first rounds. He's just not out there competing his best when the fight starts. He tends to get into a groove as the fight goes on. Felipe Bunes, we saw an example of that, right? He goes out there and gets the finish in the second round against Kevin Borjas. He was struggling, I would say, early in round 1, having some moments of adversity. Rounds 2 and 3 just absolutely unloaded a clip on Kevin Borjas, got back in a big way. So when we look at his losses on his record, just one. Devin Jackson was able to submit him in Fury FC back in 2021. Obviously, a young kid like that can make significant, substantial improvements quickly in their game. Now let's talk about his opponent, Charles Johnson. He's a guy that it's hard to criticize Charles Johnson in terms of his level of skills. Right? He's clearly very skilled in all positions in fighting. He's very difficult to finish. If you look at Charles Johnson, he's never been finished as a professional MMA fighter, and he's had a lot of fights. So he's had 6 losses, every one of them via decision. And the names, Ode Osborne, that's a bad loss. Cody Durden, that's a fine loss. Rafael Esteban, that's a fine loss. Muhammad Makayev, that's a fine loss. Brandon Royval, that's a fine loss. Sean Santella, that's a fine loss. So you look through, he has not lost to bad fighters. But he does have a habit of losing to good fighters that he faces, right? When you look at the best wins on his record, I would say Carlos Mota via 5th round finish was a great win for him. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, a split decision win. That's a win that they share, right? A common opponent. Jimmy Flick, that was a fine win. He was able to go out there and finish him, which is something that, we just saw our guy, Kentucky Tough Nate Maness struggle to do. As at Maxim, he was able to defeat him, take that undefeated record from him. He was able to defeat Jake Hadley. So it's not like he hasn't beaten good fighters along the way. But I would say that Joshua Van would be the best win of his career if he's able to get it. When you look at the Charles Johnson side, he should have a theoretical grappling advantage here. He's 4-0 career to the submission. He's been taken down a number of times over his career, but he can also wrestle in his own right. If you look at Charles Johnson, let's pull up his UFC stats so we're not speaking out of turn here. We've seen Charles Johnson secure a knockdown against Jake Hadley, 2 takedowns and 3 submission attempts against Azat Maxim, and outlanded him by more than 40 significant strikes, or almost 40 significant strikes, excuse me. He had 72 significant strikes to just 18 for Rafael Esteban, lost the unanimous decision there on the strength of 3 takedowns from Esteban. He got taken down 11 times by Cody Durden. Not a great look, but he was able to go almost even with him on significant strikes. He did attempt a submission in that fight. He outlanded Ode Osborne 60-48, but got taken down 3 times, costing him the fight. He got taken down 12 times by Muhammad Makayev. So it's funny. When you've seen, Charles Johnson in these fights, he's never really getting offensive wrestling attempts off. He's got a 23% takedown accuracy, a 67% takedown defense rate, and that is a remarkably good defense rate for a guy who's given up 12 takedowns in one fight, 11 takedowns in another fight. Everybody's trying to take him down at all times in his UFC career, and that's not going to be the case in this one, right? Joshua Van wants to stand up. He wants to strike. He's 2-1 career to the submission, 6-0 career to the knockout. Meanwhile, we've got Charles Johnson, never been knocked out, never been stopped with strikes. He's 5-0 career to the knockout prop as well. So when you're looking at a guy like Charles Johnson, he tends to be a break you down over time, volume type of striker. He did have a first-round finish against Jimmy Flick, but other than that, I'm seeing he's only had one other first-round finish via ground and pound, or 2, excuse me. And they were against 1-6 Alex Stevens and 3-1 Andrew Kinsey in the LFA. So overall, Charles is not a proven finisher. This is a fight that's more often than not going to play out over 15 minutes. You'd have to think. Joshua Van, could he be the first person to separate Charles Johnson from consciousness? I suppose it's possible, right? He's maybe the most dangerous striker that he's faced. But this is no Felipe Bunes, right? This is not a guy who's going to be as easy to get out of there. And Tristan mentions Charles has several subs, including a Kimura. I did mention that. He has wins via submission, but he hasn't submitted any high-level opposition, right? He hasn't submitted anybody in the UFC. I'm looking back. He submitted 6-0 at the time, Carly Pangolinian, which seems all right, but Pangolinian went on to lose his next 2 fights as well. He submitted way back in the day Mark Tong Van, and he submitted Ray Allard, 0-0, 7-4. So again, it's not like he hasn't submitted anybody, but he just hasn't submitted anybody quality yet. And I think that Van is not a proven grappler, but he is a proven tough guy. He's not going to give it up easily if he just gets put in one negative situation. You have to have him out grappled, in my view. Hey, Liam, shout out to Eric Betts, says, as always, thank you for the work you put in and sharing that work with the people. Always my pleasure, brother. Want to shout out to all the great people in the chat. We got my guy, MMA Line Mover, says, just tuning in. I know my guy's been dealing with some power outages and everything, so appreciate you being here, my brother. You're the man. Bets and Banter tomorrow. That's the plan for now. Stay tuned for more information on that. We'll have a link up for you as soon as possible. Be working on a guest. I believe Rich is on vacation this week, so we're going to try and find another great guest to fill in. If you want to be that guest, go ahead and get at me in the comment section or on social media. Appreciate you guys. Shout out to everybody else who's rocking with us in the chat. We got common heavy hitters in here like Dixon, like B-Negs, like Moyes, like MMA Betting Mastermind. Appreciate all you guys for being here. Dixon says hit the like button. I'd appreciate if y'all follow through with that. Shout out to my guy Marcus Williams as well, Nubian Bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia. Make sure you check him out. Make sure you show love and support. Shout out to Cole. Shout out to Tone Miggins in the chat as well. A lot of great contributors: Larry, Bravia, Aussie Fight Fan, Cole Stein, Zero Bob, excuse me. Appreciate all you guys. Thank you all for rocking with us. And if you guys have questions, comments, concerns that we didn't hit yet on the show, make sure you fire those off in the comment section as well. I appreciate it. I have to go rapid fire for the last couple fights that we have on the slate here. And the reason being, guys, I have another show that I'm doing for Roto Grinders talking about these fights from a DFS angle as well. And that's coming up in just a few minutes for me. So if you guys see that I'm speeding up a little bit here, it is not because I don't love being here discussing. It is because I have another obligation. However, like I said, we're going to circle back for all these fights in as much detail as we need to for Bets and Banter to make sure we put ourselves in a good position. And coming off of a week off from fighting, there's nothing I'd rather do than talk fights with each and every one of you guys. So thank you all so much for being here. Without further ado, guys, let's talk this women's division at 125 pounds. Just like the main event, we got Jasmine Jasudavicious. She fought Tracy Cortez last time out. Competitive fight. She got the second round. Tracy got rounds 1 and 3. That was a great fight. And what it told us is Jasmine is still willing to get out there, be a dog, stay in the fire, throw down, but against a girl like Tracy, who was able to deal with a lot of her grappling attack, who was able to outland or outwork her a little bit on the feet. She was up, Schitt's Creek without a paddle, right? Then she comes back out in Canada, gets the win over Priscilla Cachoeira, puts on for her country. Canadian women, they up. Canadian men, unless you're Shannon Hellinger and Eamon Zahabi, you've been having a tough time lately. So shout out to my boys there that have been getting it done for the Great White North. But shout out most especially to Jasmine Jasudavicious representing Niagara Top Team. She's been doing a great job in her recent performances. Her losses, guys, Tracy Cortez, who hasn't lost in 11 professional fights. Natalia Silva, who's been on a great streak of her own. Don't think she's lost so far with the big show. She lost to Elise Reed back in the day, guys, in CFFC. I don't know if she lost that fight. Y'all go back and rewatch that. Y'all tell me what you think. I thought Jasmine deserved the win against Elise Reed. And if that's the case, then, she's got a pretty damn good record under her belt, right? Julia Palastri, a girl who just fought in the UFC, looked pretty solid, looked like she was ready to compete. She was able to go out there and get the win over her on Contender Series. She was able to beat Kay Hansen back when that meant something. She beat Gabriela Fernandez. She beat Miranda Maverick. Those are impressive wins, especially the Maverick win. So I think that this is a very interesting fight on paper. On the other side, Fatima Klein does not have nearly the proven resume, does not have nearly the amount of MMA experience, but in the Invicta, she's 4-0. She's gone out there and gotten a bunch of wins, gotten a bunch of experience, fought for 4 rounds, fought for 3 rounds, the full distance, gotten a couple of finishes way back in the day. I just don't know how she's going to deal with the size and the experience of Jasudavicious here, because if she's not getting this fight to the ground, then I think that Jasmine can make it a dirty, ugly, brawling type fight and really potentially cause her problems. Jasmine's tough. She pressures. She is not afraid to make it scrappy. She ain't afraid to cheat. She ain't afraid to be a dog, to get gritty in there. And oftentimes that's caused women a lot of problems. She's put together a very solid UFC resume. 6-0, I was saying, is the professional record for Fatima Klein. And meanwhile, 4-2. As many UFC fights as pro fights for Jasmine Jasudavicious. She's 4-2 with the big show, 1-0 on the Contender Series. And overall, she's put together a very solid 10-3 professional record. So I think that this is interesting. Jasmine takedown defense against Maverick was so tough. Going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. I agree. I think technically speaking, Fatima Klein is better at grappling than Miranda Maverick. However, the physicality is a little bit different, right? We've seen Jasmine is a big, strong girl, and that I think is what gave Miranda such problems, right? Miranda is normally the more physically strong girl. She's normally dominating with her physicality. And that wasn't really the case, guys. Tracy Cortez, who's typically very physically dominant with her wrestling and grappling. She got taken down. She got bullied around at times by Jasmine Jasudavicious. And it was Tracy Cortez who felt like she needed to separate from the clinch the entire time and use her jab, separate, continue to work with her striking. So for me, this is a tricky fight. I think that Jasmine can win it. I think she can land the more impactful shots. I think Fatima Klein at 115 will be an absolute problem. But at 125, on short notice, at elevation, against a girl who typically shows up prepared and really wants to win, I think this is a tough fight. And I understand why people got in the plus money early when they thought there was some wiggle room there. Now at a chalk price for Fatima Klein, I think it's a lot to ask. I don't think she should be favored here. I think if anything, a pick'em is fine, but I just don't see how you could favor somebody with this little amount of experience against somebody who's big, strong, committed, wants to be there, like Jasmine Jasudavicious. Next up, guys, we got Blackshear and Montel Jackson. Great fight. This one was put together on super short notice, so one of the fights I'm least prepared for. However, I really respect him on Blackshear. If you look at the losses he's taken throughout his career, Keith Richardson had, 20 plus professional fights. When he fought him, he had 4 professional fights. He lost that one in 2017. Lost to Chris Mutino, who's been on the run of his life, in the regional scene, maybe back to the UFC sooner than you think. Lost to Pat Sabatini in CFFC. Pat Sabatini, he can get tested on the chin, but otherwise he's an absolute hammer. He lost to Danny Sabatello, a Bellator title challenger. He lost to Yusuf Zalal, he went to a draw with Yusuf Zalal in the UFC. He lost to Farid Basharat, and he lost to Mariya Batista. What those guys have in common is they're all solid fighters, right? Damon Blackshear doesn't lose to anybody unless they're a very solid fighter. Montel Jackson, same thing is largely true of him. He's lost just 2 times in his career. He lost to Ricky Simone. He lost to Brett Johns. Those were both guys that were able to go out there, put him to the ground, take him down, get on top, get to good positions. His wins, though, he beat Jesse Strader. I don't know what to make of that. He beat JP Buys and didn't finish him. I'm not impressed by that. And honestly, I bet JP Buys there. I said JP Buys will take Montel Jackson's back. And he did, and also got dropped like 50 times. So you could be right on some things. You'd be wrong about others, right? But I said that, I thought JP Buys was going to take his back. And I bet him at a big plus money number. The plus money is very thin here on Damon Blackshear. It's not the price I was hoping for. I wanted more plus money, but I think I might have to sprinkle, on Damon Blackshear by submission in this fight. He's a very dangerous submission grappler, and I think that when he gets after it early, he could create a lot of problems. I have seen Montel put in dangerous grappling situations. He's worked a lot on his grappling since. He's 7-2 in the UFC representing Pura Vida BJJ. So he is a solid enough guy, but at 32 years of age, a guy who fights very infrequently, the win over Hanayaya, it was a nice win, but he's minus 600 against a guy who's very, older in his career and long in the tooth. So I just feel like we're probably going to see more improvements from Damon Blackshear here, who's still younger, who's still moving around, pursuing fighting at a very high level. If you look, Damon Blackshear just did a camp in Thailand to improve his striking, his grappling, his wrestling has been a work in progress throughout his career. Him and Farid had very close, very competitive scrambles, and I rate Farid. I think Farid is a good fighter. So for me, I kind of like the Blackshear side here, but I want a bigger plus money tag to get involved from a betting perspective. And I'm still on rapid fire mode, guys. So next up, we got Luana Santos and Mariya Agapova. Listen, Mariya Agapova, there's a lot of stuff outside the octagon that doesn't sound promising for her, right? But inside the octagon, she has shown a couple times she's aggressive. She can land strikes. And Luana Santos, I still feel, has a lot to prove in the UFC. Did she look good against Juliana Miller? After she landed a big right hand and Juliana Miller lost her ability to stand upright, yes, she looked good. Prior to that, she was getting hit cleanly. She looked like she was kind of throwing in slow motion. I wasn't altogether impressed. Stephanie Egger, another big, long girl that's not very good at striking, was able to land, connect, give her some problems, push her cardio in round 3. I think that Mariya Agapova is probably on the fast track to getting cut, but I just don't know that Luana Santos is as credible as she's hyped up to be right now. She made a huge body transformation. You could see she used to have a lot more body fat. She has slimmed down tremendously. She's gotten a better body composition, more athletic. She looks like she's trying to improve those things, but I just don't like her striking defense. I think she's quite upright. I'm not, basically, I'd want to see her getting takedowns consistently throughout this fight to feel comfortable. Otherwise, I'd just be a little bit worried. If she's trying to strike out there, she could end up in some dangerous situations. And Bravi is saying, I swear, if she doesn't go for the takedown, how many times in WMMA do you see somebody with a suboptimal game plan? Think Rayanne Amanda against Pooja Tomar, right? This is the other thing. B-Negs, she was minus 1250 against Dawson and lost. Exactly, right? There was a lot of hype on Mariya Agapova. People thought Mariya Agapova was the girl. They thought she was the next one. She had the boxing credentials. She had this. She's gotten submissions. She's got good finishing instincts. All of those things were true. But then she didn't have the cardio to last against Sheena Dobson when she adrenaline dumped. She's been 15 minutes. Guys, she fought Tracy Cortez on Contender Series, went 15 minutes, didn't get finished, right? So a lot of people now are telling you there's no chance she can make it 15 minutes. I think that's hogwash. And then the other thing is Luana Santos should be superior on the ground here, but people are talking about Helena Carver submitted her. So, Luana, it's like, guys, Helena Carver is like John Danaher's like understudy, right? Like literally like she's like a 16, 17-year-old who's just like learning from the best jiu-jitsu player in the world. Or it's not player, but the best jiu-jitsu coach in the world, hands-on frequently. It's like, yeah, she's going to be very good. She's going to be better. And here's the other thing, guys. If you're a pro UFC fighter and somebody puts you in a heel hook, you tap, period, point blank. That's it. So I think people just have a lack of understanding about that one. Helena would absolutely dominate Santos on the ground, in my humble opinion, as well. So when you just look at that, like, piece of evidence that people are putting forward as like why Santos is way better than her, I don't see that. For me, it's Agapova or pass on the money line. Maybe there's a way to play it on the prop market. I'll have to look. I'll revisit with you guys tomorrow, but again, probably Agapova or pass for me. Fremd versus Petroski. Listen, Petroski has more skill, I think, in terms of pure grappling, but I think Fremd has a little bit less fuck off to him, right? I think Fremd is a little bit more willing to stick it out when the going's getting tough. And if that's the case, he's probably got a good opportunity here. He's 30 years of age compared to 33 for Petroski. He's the much bigger guy in terms of both height and reach. He trains at altitude. Petroski, known gasser. So yeah, don't love it. I think it's a weird fight, but give me Fremd, especially if the fight gets extended. Last but not least, no, I'm kidding, guys. It is last and least. Evan Elder taking on Darius Flowers. Listen, Darius Flowers is dead to me after that Michael Johnson fight. He had every opportunity to win it. Michael Johnson is like a walking loss waiting to happen. And Darius Flowers gassed out. He looked terrible. He said he thought he was going to die making the weight. Now he's somehow going to make the weight again. Doesn't seem like a good idea. Let me just this is taking place at 170. Oh, shit. Yo, at 170? I got to give this one more thought. Evan Elder should whoop his ass. I mean, he's way better at fighting. But I also think that when I'm looking at this, I'm saying to myself, Darius Flowers, if he's not cutting a ton of weight, he does throw hard. Evan Elder has been a letdown so far in the UFC, as much and all as I like him. He's just been taking damage. The Gennaro Valdez fight even was not as clean as it should have been. And I'll leave it at that. Guys, I got to get out of here. Peace, love, and chicken grease to each and every one of you guys. Thank you all so much for rocking with me. We didn't even take a sip from the coffee because we were so zoned in. We were so dialed for this fight card. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and drop a like on the video. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate the support. If you guys are excited to hear more fight talk like this, make sure that you get subscribed, hit that bell for notifications because we're coming back to do it all again tomorrow. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys all enjoy UFC Denver. I hope you guys win a ton of bets. If you have questions, comments, concerns, fire those off in the chat down below in the comments section. God bless. And until next time, come back. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, guys.